Do you have a story in mind?
No, I don't. Nothing. I know it really sounded like I was going to.
It did, yeah.
I can't quite figure out the difference between assimilation and integration, but appropriation is from the point of view of the power group taking whatever they want from the less powerful group and using it without any consideration of what it really is.
So I'm thinking about appropriation just straight up like theft.
This is a podcast where two old friends, both Canadian, one black and one white, and both men, explore what it looks like to adopt the mindset of an inclusive society. Instead of asking, how do we get there, Jake and Chris discuss, what does it look like to act as if we're already there? Welcome to The Disorienting Dilemma.
I mean, I think appropriation is just stealing stuff. You're taking things that's not yours, and so starting to think about that just because you can, because you have the position, because you have the power, because you have the wherewithal to just do it. It's the appropriation, in my view, is the height of being selfish and not caring about other people. And so I'm just going to take what I like and I'm going to use it for whatever purpose I want to use it for. That's, I think, the undercurrent of what makes appropriation. I think when we try to start making all of these other alliterations like appropriation with or appreciation or appropriation and assimilation, we're trying to pretty up something that's pretty ugly, actually, which is just you're stealing stuff. You're taking stuff that's not yours and you're making it yours. And it doesn't matter what significance it holds to someone else. It doesn't matter. You're attributing its own meaning because you like it and you want it. And so you're going to take it. There's something super colonial about that. And so when systems start to build it, and then we export it, right? So once we get really, really good at it, we not only appropriate it, we merchandise the right out of it. Right?
Well, you're talking about this, and I could use this because we'll cite the reachout.com website here. But in Australia, there are cases where white Australian businesses have stolen Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artwork for use on T-shirts and souvenirs. Right. This allows the dominant culture to make money, commoditize it, just like you were saying, from the non-dominant culture without benefiting the artists or explaining anything about what that art or anything means. It's just...
You got it. Yeah, it's appropriation without attribution.
Yeah. Appropriation without attribution. That's the phrase.
They get no credit. You're stealing it. You're representing it like it's like something that you just came up with. And back to my point, it is theft. You are a robbing thief.
Wait.
You are.
I mean,
wait. I'm getting a little worked up. I'm stuck on a theft narrative.
Well, we can use the theft narrative. Because I think that's the severity with which we need to frame this, because white middle classers will only understand property rights.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you have to do it property because the excuse is going to be the same. So I came into work and there's like a passive-aggressive note on the lunchroom fridge. And it's like, can whoever keeps drinking my energy drinks just stop it? Thank you.
Was it? Tell me there was a smiling
extra
face. Tell me there was a smiling
face.
No
smiling face. But it was a thank you. I could read the thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the worst ever.
But drifting towards an FU.
Yeah, well, definitely, right? But of course, they would get in trouble if they said that. So we just say thanks. But what I started thinking about is what made that energy drink, right? So what made that energy drink, that theft happen, is the same thing, the same core ingredients that you need in any type of a theft. You need means, the motive, and you need the opportunity. You have to be able to steal. Something has to be there for you to steal.
Okay.
And you have to want to steal it. So I want to open the fridge. I know it's not my energy drink. There's an energy drink there. And I actually have to want an energy drink to steal. And then I get to complete this act of theft. Well, it's not so dissimilar to what people do when appropriating from a culture. I just really, really liked that. And I wanted to dress up like that for Halloween. And what's interesting, I think, is some of the excuses that you hear around property theft are some of the same ones that we hear as excuses when it's appropriation of other types. I was just borrowing it. I just really liked it. I didn't mean any harm. I didn't know anyone was going to be angry. It seemed to be there for the taking, right? And then still theft. You're still a thiever person. Stop stealing. Stop taking things that's not yours, right? That's kind of what I want to just keep screaming. Like, it makes me so angry.
But if I bought it, it would be okay.
There's a difference between a brand and something being used in a commercial way and something that is being stolen, not attributed, and we try to make it about us. I think Washington Redskins was a great example of that, where that brand was appropriated.
But to me, that's a different category. You've got a whole commercial enterprise taking an artifact or symbol from a culture, commoditizing it in a way that they can make money without any consideration of what it means to say chief or red or any sort of anything about First Nations in North America. That's a little different than if the First Nations walked up and said, arrowheads. We know that white people really like collecting arrowheads, so we've marketed these just to white people. They're facsimiles, they're arrowheads. Go ahead and buy one and put one up on your wall. If that group says it's okay, is that when it doesn't become assimilation anymore? Like it does seem difficult to know when I'm just buying something and when I'm stealing something with my purchase.
I think when we steal it, we're not giving any credit. We're not. That is the without attribution. That is when you make it your own and make it about you. Becomes a real problematic part of appropriation. I think, even though I mocked the alliteration, there is space for appreciation. There is. That's really cool. I really like that. I think that is to be revered or to be celebrated, or I want to celebrate this part of you, right? Like this of your culture, because this says a lot about who you are. That really resonates with me. That lands with me, this kind of connection. I've got a connection to it without trying to make it about me.
What's interesting is this consideration only applies to the dominant group, the dominant power group, the most visible group in all power structures and with a history of power. So in the United States, in North America, in Canada, the colonization was the first theft, right? Stole the country, no negotiations, and where there were, they were all reneged. And it's mostly, a genocide would be better description of it.
An appropriate description.
An appropriate description. And then on top of the colonizing, so we took the land and the economic welfare and the health of the folks, and then we dig into the culture. So now we're going to appropriate the things that we think are cute or nice. We don't actually care what they mean. I just needed an outfit for Halloween. And of course, all of these are on a continuum of offensive. Blackface would be one of the more extreme versions of offensiveness just because it got tied to white ridicule of an entire group. That seems pretty obvious, like that's appropriation. But I think people, I know myself 20 years ago, I just would have been confused by this because I thought, well, don't we all dress up at Halloween? Like, what about witches and Dracula? Like, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have made my mind wouldn't have been considerate enough or seasoned enough to start to parse the differences here. And I'm just wondering, where are we supposed to learn this? Because the dominant culture has no obligation to learn any of this.
Oh, I think they have all the obligation.
No,
to learn it.
I know.
Just
I know.
no desire to learn.
I know,
it.
but there's no pressure on that. There's no pressure on white people to have to dive into this beyond any sort of discomfort they might be feeling.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. Unlike the other groups, you've got to deal with this. You've got no option.
Well, I think you're right, because think about the privilege angle when you talk about blackface in particular. It's performative. It's put on for fun. It's put on for, as you say, a particular group or in a moment that group's ridicule or entertainment enjoyment. The extreme privilege moment is in that you get to wash that off. Mm-hmm. I don't get to wash off my blackface. I actually don't. For whatever good or whatever funny that you think comes with that, all of the pain of oppression is still attached to it as well. Mm-hmm. But in the privilege of the moment, you just get to wipe it off. And then you get to go right back and pretend that that's not. There's a ton that is layered in why blackface. I mean, we're getting into it with appropriation, but the layers of intersecting privilege and oppression in dressing up is hard. But I think when you're talking about initial genocide and stealing land, it is that dominant. I think that is the right way to think about it in terms of these dominant cultures. It's as dominant as it is with the energy drink in the refrigerator, because it's there, because I want it, and because I can.
Yeah,
that's how these kind of. There is no pushback. This is not a negotiation. This isn't me giving up something and saying, giving you a pass to do this. It's someone just deciding with all of the cards and all of the power, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that it would be interesting to see this as a formal part of the development of young human beings, to be able to admit, okay, let's level set here. One, we live on land that we took from where I grew up in Nova Scotia, the Mi'kmaq. And then we took a lot of their stuff and called it cute because we thought it was nice to have. But yeah, it's sort of like insult to injury, the multiple levels.
Yeah, the number of places where I'm still here in the unceded, unsurrendered land of the Mi'kmaq people, where I am talking to you from right now. We've got a lot of conflict right now, particularly between Indigenous and non-Indigenous fishers over the lobster fishery.
Oh yeah, I've been reading about that.
There's a lot of conflict right now, and guess what? They're not. No one really wants to appropriate that kind of part of the struggle, do they? That's right. But when it's trendy, folks will go to a market and buy from non-Indigenous folks. Will buy dream catchers and will like to have a eagle feather in their home because it's tied to this land. I mean, those are offensive appropriations if it's not your culture. I mean,
okay.
when I'm working in a restorative justice circle, because I identify as African Nova Scotian, oftentimes we will use a talking piece that is central to a lot of restorative ways of working around the world. It would be absolutely reprehensible, wrong. It would be appropriation if, because on this land, folks have used eagle feathers as a talking piece, if I, because it's not my culture, then start to use an eagle feather as a talking piece. What I can do in those moments is, which I always do, is I start with a land acknowledgement. I always will tie the type of work that we're doing on this land to Mi'kma'ki, and then I say, similar to when cultures would use a talking piece, what will we use as our symbol of a conversation today? But I'm not trying to just because it's an eagle feather, use an eagle feather.
Right.
That would be wildly offensive.
Right. Okay. I can see what you're saying. I can also see if a Native community was a part of it and a Native individual sort of handed it around or initiated it. That'd be different. But what is the difference? So China, as a country, sold a ton of tea to England, and England paid for it with opium.
Mm-hmm.
This was not right. And the Germans and the French and the Dutch and the Americans all jumped in on it. And we tied it to missionary expansion. It was known as Jesus opium.
Right.
Okay. Definitely wrong. But, and actually, did you know 1/4 of Britain's income during this period was because of opium sales? Britain was historically and has managed to retain their number one place in the world as the biggest drug pusher cartel ever to have existed. And Queen Victoria
I think that
was in charge of it.
I think that's because the slave trade that they also were in was just starting to dry up. So they had to
they had to pivot
industry.
To pivot.
Yeah, you have to pivot. It's absolutely, anyway. That's probably another podcast.
That's probably another one. But let's just go back to buying tea. That's Chinese. I'm buying it. I'm in England. Love it. I love drinking it out of China, right? I love we create our own little thing for it in England, and now it's quite English to drink tea. Was that appropriation? Or because of the economic arrangement, let's take out the opium, but because of the economic arrangement, was that appropriate? Because if I'm talking to a native individual, an artist who makes all of their money from selling native art to non-natives primarily, and then she hears this podcast and we say, yeah, you shouldn't take a dream catcher unless you're willing to learn or understand it. She might push back and say, I don't care why people take it. Like, as long as I'm native and selling it, it's my art. I can do whatever I want with it. Does that become complicated? I don't know.
I would agree that a person ought to be buying that from an indigenous artist. I would agree.
Okay,
and
that's the point you're making. Okay.
Yeah. You can't represent the work or take it without without attribution.
Yeah.
Someone else owns it.
Yeah.
And I could buy it and I should pay a fair price for that. I should pay, we should enter into this negotiation as you have something I really, really like and I would like to buy that. And there is no power dynamic, that we have a negotiated relationship where you have this thing that I really, really like that is yours, that remains yours, that stays yours in terms of all attribution and credit and significance. And then you can release that to me for whatever we trade for, money or whatever. I think that's fine. I just can't take it, and I can't go and sell them as my own.
All right. So I'm glad we're having this conversation today, because about 2 months ago, the CEO of Realize Worth decided that it would be appropriate to give each member of the team a small sum of money, just a few $100s, to go into the local community and buy art or anything else from a Black artist. You could order a huge meal for you and your family from a Black restaurant, but it was money that was an occasion to interact with Black merchants of some sort, whether of art or food or some other services. And as I began to think about that, I thought, we're going to put up a nice piece of art from a Black artist on our wall. Wait a minute. Hold on. Am I doing something wrong? Because honestly, the piece that I want to choose, we read about the person, we love their inspiration, just like any other artist. It's almost incidental in the end that she's Black. But the point is to force us to think outside of our in-group and to intentionally spend time with people from the Black community who had something to sell. So based on everything that we're talking about, I don't think that was appropriation. I think that was appreciation.
Yeah, well, I also two things that you said that stuck out to me when you said it was almost after the fact or incidental that you know, the artist, her Blackness. And I would say yes to you. I would suggest that
That's,
to her.
you know what, that is totally fair.
Probably quite core to who and how she shows up
and to the art. Yeah, and to the art itself.
Yeah,
it was obviously a statement about being Black in America. That's what it meant. Yeah, so her Blackness, I don't even know if that's the right term, was central to what I loved about the piece.
Right.
But I sort of moved to the level of, what a great artist, rather than...
Yeah, like there's this weird moment. We always get to it. Well, does a person want to be an artist or a Black artist? And do I really like it because this is great art, or do I like it because it's Black art?
That's fair.
Can it be Black great art? So when I heard you tell that story, I'm listening to it from an equity lens, which is actually quite encouraging because it starts to model for folks how to show up in different ways as allies and supporters. We as a community, and I say we in African Nova Scotian, but people of African descent have now been calling for several months for folks to take action and saying, you know, silence is complicit, you have to do something. This idea that to go out to use some influence, some leverage, to use privilege, and to then have folks go out and make a difference, to buy art, to go out and eat at these restaurants. I think this is an equity commitment. This is to remove the barriers, to send people out. This is not sort of, in my view, that white savior narrative that I will come and save you, which would be problematic. But it is every bit about access and opportunity. Yeah. And if I can spend my dollars, I want to spend them with you. And I'm making a commitment to spend them here. I think that is not appropriation. That is appreciation. And from an equity lens, that is what we hope to do, because we recognize that there's a whole bunch of systemic inequities that would not make that person's art likely to be seen as widely, as broadly as someone else's.
Yeah, that's it exactly. It was the systemic inequities in terms of exposure to artists and whatnot. But then it was also our in-group bias, our cognitive and implicit bias to say, look, we have it. So it is unseen and we can't see it working. So we have to create a condition where we consciously circumvent it. And it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel a little like, I don't know if I would have normally picked this person, but odds are you wouldn't, because this is about addressing bias. Right. This is about stepping outside. This is about becoming educated and unraveling that inside of ourselves.
This is the ally work, right? This is the fact that you're wrestling and struggling with, before I hang it up, have I thought through? I think this is what we want people to do. We want people to be more thoughtful about decisions, that there should be some weightiness around it. This is the heaviness, the weight that actually comes with recognizing privilege. It is not enough to say, well, I don't have it. Well, that would be a lie. And it's not enough to just say, well, I'm going to be better and recognize my privilege. I recognize I have it. Well, don't recognize, use it. And this is part of the using
don't
it.
Recognize,
this is the wrestling in it.
Yep.
Well, recognizing, I've got tons of people around right now who are just spending time recognizing that I am a person of privilege. Okay. So how is that made? That in a $5 bill, and I still got $5. So it's action time, but don't steal. That's the wrong kind of action.
That's the wrong kind of take action. But you should know you've got some bad habits that you have inherited from hundreds of years of really bad habits. So just think it through and start. And we're not quibbling over something. And it's funny when you said that we hope to see in an inclusive society, and by we, I think you mean, and just to be clear for everybody listening, it's all of us who want, wherever we are in this process of an inclusive society, and it's something that we'll probably never achieve perfectly, but it is a direction that we can all head in together. And some of us are going to be out in front, and some of us are going to be behind. Doesn't matter. That is totally fine. So when Jake says we want to see an inclusive society, I would say I'm part of that we too. But I want it in a different way. And I've got different muscles to flex, and I've got different insight than you do. Right, Jake? I mean.
Yeah. It asks us the question is, can we glimpse a better way forward? Do we actually have the audacity of hope to think differently about what could be, and then work at removing the barriers that are standing in the way from getting there? I mean, that's kind of where this is. This is just glimpsing in the future and being really mindful of the things that will not get us there. And appropriation is one of those things that will not get us moving in the right direction. To your point, they become second nature.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking a little bit about your tea comment, though. I do wonder if over time things start to become assimilated. And so if we have assimilation where this sort of, the lines get blurred. I thought this was from another culture, and now it's part of this culture. And there's probably space to recognize that if it happens over time and gradually.
I agree 100%.
But we have to pay attention that it's not being appropriated all the way through.
Yeah.
But if the idea around inclusive and diverse communities, then we might expect some assimilation.
Yep.
You to change me to change you, without ever trying to pretend that I just changed myself.
Right. It's very interesting. I I think assimilation is a normal part of human evolution in societies. You see Rome started as a city. It started to conquer all the other regions and cities around it. Pretty soon, everybody on the peninsula, you're Roman. And then it went from there when they, Greeks, everybody, Jewish individuals, I'm a Roman. Like being a Roman citizen, being able to hold that up, I'm on the power side, is part of the joy of assimilation, let's say. But assimilation without obligation, I think a society is so much richer, like in a lot of the older Muslim societies where you could just have a wide variety of beliefs and foods, and not all areas were like this, but I have read stories about certain areas of the world in certain periods of time where the Muslim faith was very open to a lot of diversity. And I think that made those cultures richer and stronger even to this day.
I think you're right.
This podcast is brought to you by the RW Institute, produced by Daniel Parker, recorded remotely in Los Angeles from Baltimore, Maryland, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with the conversation. Care to react? Submit your comments at rw.institute or on the comment feature where you're listening now.